Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Budget Magic. So, if you follow the Brewers Minute series here on the channel, you might know what we're up to this week. We are going infinite in a million different ways, in standard no less. So this deck, I'm calling it Infinite Bantharmonicon, can make infinite mana, it can draw infinite cards, well, limited by the number in our deck, of course, and make infinite damage, all in standard. It is super, super sweet. Even better, 97 bucks in the paper world, 37 ticks on Magic Online. So super cheap for a deck that is pretty competitive and just super awesome and fun to play. Anyway, a quick reminder before we break down the deck. If you enjoy Budget Magic and the other series here on the channel, it would be amazing of you if you could take a second, click that subscribe button down in the corner of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's talk Infinite Bantharmonicon. So the key thing to this combo is Felidar Guardian and or Wisp-Weaver Angel. They're essentially the same in our deck. Our main goal is to get two of these cards on the battlefield. It doesn't really matter which two Felidar Guardians, two Wisp-Weavers, one of each, any combination of those. And then if we throw in Panharmonicon, we not only have infinite blinking, which you can do with just a Felidar Guardian and Wisp-Weaver. Just Felidar Guardian and Wisp-Weaver, you'll get infinite enter the battlefield triggers, because you can blink the Felidar Guardian, then blink the Wisp-Weaver with the Felidar Guardian, then blink the Felidar with the Wisp-Weaver, or two Felidars or whatever. Just keep blinking, but that's kind of not the goal of our deck. We add in an extra step with Panharmonicon, and adding in Panharmonicon lets us do some really crazy things. So when we go through this infinite blink loop, we're going to get two blink triggers each time our Felidar Guardians enter the battlefield. So with the first blink trigger, we target the other Felidar Guardian, and then with the second blink trigger, we can target something else. And then we're going to do something with the second blink trigger, and then blink the Felidar Guardian, repeat this process over and over again. It might make more sense as we kind of go through the list. So here's an easy example. If we can assemble our combo of two Felidar Guardians or the Wisp-Weaver, whatever, along with Panharmonicon and any land, which we will by default have on the battlefield if we're casting 6-drops and 4-drops and so forth, we use that second blink trigger on the land, and what we effectively do is untap a land. So every time we go through the blink loop, we're untapping a land and then tapping it again in between. And this process gives us infinite mana. So Felidar Guardian blinks land and Felidar Guardian. Next Felidar Guardian blinks the land that we tap in between, blinks Felidar Guardian, and the land which blinks Felidar Guardian, the land. So essentially, over the course of time, going through this loop a bunch of times, we're going to have infinite amount of mana because we keep tapping that land and untapping it with the blink trigger. With Wisp-Weaver, it does do the same thing, but it's a little tricky because Wisp-Weaver only targets creatures. So Wisp-Weaver is essentially just blinking the Felidar Guardian and not untapping a land, but then with the Felidar Guardian trigger, we still get to untap the land. So that gives us infinite mana, and the next step is to draw a bunch of cards. So Thraben Inspector, Rogue Refiner, Cloud Blazer, and Prophetic Prism are cards that are just really good with Panharmonicon anyway, and that's one of the things I like about this deck. We have this infinite combo that closes out the game, but we can also just value our opponent into oblivion by drawing a couple cards with Rogue Refiner, thanks to Panharmonicon, making some clues, doubling up our Cloud Blazer to gain some life. Prophetic Prism helps fix our mana, draws us two cards with Panharmonicon. So we can go on the value plan with all of these cards, but the big payoff is to throw them into the blink loop. So remember the loop we were talking about with lands. Eventually, let's say we made 200 mana. We could make any number we want. 200 is a nice, easy to deal with number. So we have 200 mana floating from blinking Felidar Guardian in the land and Felidar Guardian in the land, back and forth, back and forth. Then we turn our attentions to a card draw spell. So this could be the Prophetic Prism, could be Rogue Refiner, could even be the Thraben Inspector, because we have infinite mana, so we can sack any clues that we make. But we stop blinking our land with the second trigger, and instead blink something that draws us a card. We go through this loop a bunch of times, and the end result is we will draw our entire deck. Draw, 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 keep blinking Felidar Guardians with the second trigger, Prophetic Prism, Cloud Blazer, whatever. Draw through our entire deck, and then the big payoff, we have infinite mana, our entire deck is in our hand. we have a single Walking Ballista. So Walking Ballista is super sweet in this deck. It's also expensive though, so I didn't want to play more than one of them. It wouldn't really fit under the budget, but it works really well as a one-of combo finisher. So the basic plan is we make all that mana, we draw our entire deck. Eventually, as we draw our entire deck, we're going to draw into a Walking Ballista, and we're going to have an infinite amount of mana floating, and then we cast Walking Ballista with X being equal to our opponent's life total, or greater than their life total, and then ping our opponent to death one at a time by removing counters. So that's the entire plan of the deck. Get that blinking going, draw our entire deck, infinitely big Walking Ballista to deal infinite damage to our opponent's face. And like I said, if something happens, we lose our Walking Ballista or something, we can also just use that mana to cast a whole bunch of stuff and have this huge board and beat our opponent down, draw a ton of cards, and so forth. So that is the backup plan, but Walking Ballista gives us a way to win with the combo without having to untap, and it doesn't require us to go into additional color. You could use some sort of big red X burn spell or something, but Walking Ballista is nice because it fits right into our Bant package, and we don't have to worry about another color of mana, and it's just a good card. I would play 4 if they were cheaper, just because it's a great 2-drop anyway. The rest of the deck has some pieces that are just kind of support pieces. Eldritch Evolution is really helpful with setting up the combo, so we get a Felidar Guardian out, we have a Servant of the Conduit, or a Rogue Refiner, or a Cloud Blazer. We can just sack one of our other creatures, get the second Felidar Guardian, and immediately go to the combo, and opponents don't usually expect this. Like, they are thinking, oh, they're gonna get some value card, a Cloud Blazer or something, so a lot of times they don't expect us to Eldritch Evolution for this infinite combo, and it catches them by surprise, which is pretty sweet. Servant of the Conduit just speeds things up, allows us to cast our Bantharmonicon on turn 3, or our Felidar Guardian on turn 3. Pious Evangel gives us a way to make infinite life without Bantharmonicon. So if we have a Felidar Guardian and another Felidar Guardian or Wisweaver Angel, we use those infinite blink triggers and have a Pious Evangel out every time a creature enters a battlefield. We gain a life, so we can gain infinite life that way just by blinking the Felidar Guardians back and forth a whole bunch of times. Doesn't win us the game, but an infinite life that buys us an infinite amount of time to set up the actual win condition with Bantharmonicon. And then Stasis Snare is just a bit of instant speed removal. Good in a whole bunch of matchups. We want something that would be instant speed because of the Saheeli Rai combo. I don't know how important that'll be moving forward since the deck wasn't great at Pro Tour, but it's still just a fine removal spell. As far as the rest of the mana base, a bunch of dual lands, including Lumbering Falls, as kind of a backup win condition. Meandering River, some forests, some islands, and some plains. In the sideboard, Heroic Invention lets us protect our creatures. It doesn't necessarily work well with the combo because when we blink something, it's a new object. It's no longer hexproof and indestructible. However, it does give us a way to fizzle a targeted removal spell as we're comboing off. So one way an opponent can break up a combo would be as we go for the first blink of a Felidar Guardian to, let's say, Grasp of Darkness the Felidar Guardian. Well, Heroic Intervention comes down, counters that by giving the Felidar Guardian hexproof. As long as our opponent doesn't have an additional removal spell, then we're good to combo off. Natural Obsolescence, just the most efficient artifact removal spell, great against vehicles, Heart of Cure, and all that stuff. Negate to protect our combo, also counters a lot of vehicles. Coordinated Field, Fumigate, and Stasis Snare give us a bunch more removal of all different varieties. And then you will see in some Authority of the Councils, this was like in the maybe board, and I think it's in the sideboard for a couple of our matches. Originally, I intended to put it in the sideboard, then I forgot to put it in the sideboard, then I added it into the sideboard, so I didn't want it to be confusing. Although now that we see the Saheeli combo is less important, I'm not sure it's really all that necessary. I mean, it's still a fine sideboard slot and I don't mind having it, but it's less important than it was when it looked like the Saheeli Felidar combo could be the best thing in the format. Instead, it's just like another kind of okay thing to do. Anyway, that is Infinite Bantharmonicon in Standard, and that's our budget magic for this week. And you probably guessed this by now, but I love this deck. This deck does so many things I like. We get the Bantharmonicon package, which is just, Bantharmonicon is near the top of my favorite card list. We have tons of sweet things to double up, from Thraben Inspector to Rogue Refiner to Cloud Blazer to draw a bunch of cards. We have Eldritch Evolution for consistency, and then we literally have just about every way you can go infinite in a deck in Standard, which is just so sweet. It's not something that comes up very often, that you can really, you're not just going infinite with mana, which that in Standard is rare enough, but we're going infinite with mana and with damage and with gaining life thanks to Cloud Blazers and Pious Evangels, drawing cards. It's just really cool. So it's like a Bantharmonicon deck that's even more awesome, because sometimes we just got our opponent when they don't expect it with this infinite combo out of nowhere. So I think it's been pretty competitive. It's pretty sweet. It's fairly competitive, and I just really like this deck. It combines a whole bunch of things that I like. It's a ton of fun to play. Anyway, that's our Budget Magic deck for this week. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the videos, and I will talk to you soon.